Okay. Take 5? Is this gonna work? I did not realize how difficult it was going to be to find a place in my apartment with good enough lighting to film. Okay, let's try this again. Hello again, YouTube. Welcome back to L Space. My name is Tristan, and today we are going to be talking about my March TBR, the books that I want to read in the month of March. Now, I will confess to you that there are quite a few rereads on this list because I am preparing for a class that I'm going to be teaching in April, and 3 of these books are going to be ones that I've read before and need to reread again so that I can have a good foundation on what I'm going to be teaching in April. The first book that I'm rereading this month is The Lady's Paradise by Emile Zola. This is going to be my first time reading the book in English, but as you can see, I'm already part of the way through. So far, I'm very much enjoying it. This is about a woman named Denise who moves from the country town of Valognes to Paris to try to find a job. She brings her 2 brothers, one who's very young, one who's about 15, and she ends up getting a job in kind of the first iteration of the modern department store. As I mentioned in my newbie tag, Zola's work really talks a lot about the modernizing Paris and what France looks like as it thrusts itself into the modern world. This is also a very interesting look into early industrial capitalism because this is a time when people still had a lot of hope for what that economic system could do. And it's very interesting to see kind of this is what you ordered and then what came in the mail is a desolate hellscape, you know? So for the most part, this book is still pretty applicable today. There are a lot of moments that talk about how the management really screws over the employees for the sake of profits and just sort of the struggle of living on your own, trying to support people in the big city. So even though this book is over 100 years old, I think that the stuff that it talks about is very applicable today. And sort of the argument that this book is making is that big business is the way forward and that the small artisan local shops are the ones that kind of are more antiquated and need to be pushed out in favor of the big department store. So even though this book argues kind of for the sake of an Amazon-like entity, the social implications and ramifications of such things remain very interesting nonetheless. So that is The Lady's Paradise. Now, in that same vein, I wanted to read a nonfiction called Paris Reborn so that I could have a good factual basis to talk about the things that are going on in The Lady's Paradise with my students. This is a historical look into how Napoleon III and the Baron Haussmann just bulldozed the medieval city of Paris and rebuilt it to what it is today. And this is a super interesting time in history because, as I said, the Industrial Revolution is really ramping up and people have a lot of hope for the modern future, the future of modernity. And there's a lot of interesting ethical things going on in this time period too. So I'm excited to read this and kind of get a little deeper into what's going on. Okay, we are back into the reread section. So as I said, I'm teaching classes in April. That was the first one on Paris and the modernizing world. This next class is more about writing from a perspective that is not your own. So think white author writing about the Black experience, or straight author writing about the gay experience, etc. So to kind of tackle some of those ethical dilemmas, I'm having my students read 2 books. The first of them is a book talk and booktube favorite, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. This is my lovely book of the month edition. This is how I got introduced to the book. And this is about 2 friends, Sam and Sadie, as they design video games and start a really successful sort of an indie video game studio. This book has some pretty interesting discussions on that very thing of writing from a perspective that's not your own. It kind of talks about who owns culture, you know, and is there any sort of copyright that you can truly enforce when dealing with a culture that's not yours or just culture in general, all while having a really lovely discussion on the value of video games as artwork. And I love this book. There's so many lines in here that just make my heart sing, and it's just a wonderful book. So I'm excited to read this again. It's been about a year since I read this, So I'm excited to jump back in. Next up is another popular booktube favorite, or just popular booktube book, Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. Now, this is a book about a white woman who steals the manuscript to her friend of Chinese descent, makes a few changes, and then publishes it as if it were her own work because her friend died in a tragic pancake accident. Now, I've read this book before. I read it, I think, last October or September or something like that. And I listened to this as an audiobook, which I really liked. So I'm excited to read it as the physical format. And obviously this book is kind of the creme de la creme for talking about, writing about an experience that is not yours. Now, I don't really know what I think about this book, and that's why I wanted to read it again and take my time with it a little more to really reflect on some of the things that it's talking about. This book, when I listened to the book the first time, it definitely came across that Kuang had quite the bone to pick, and this is said bone that she is picking. It's really written from a place of anger, and so that I think in some ways detracts from what she's trying to accomplish, but nonetheless the actual ethical dilemmas that are going on in this book are pretty well explored, and it does provide a lot of fuel for good discussion. So that is Yellowface. I am excited to read this again. This is another book that I'm going to be teaching, and so we'll see how that goes. The last novel that I'm going to be reading in March is Hello Beautiful by Anne Napolitano, and this is sort of a reworking of Little Women. It takes Little Women into conversation and kind of revamps some of the story beats following a couple generations of characters, and this comes highly recommended by my boyfriend's sister, who said that if I really liked Lessons in Chemistry, I would really like this one, which Lessons in Chemistry was one of my favorite books last year, and so I'm pretty excited to read this one. I've never read it before, so this is a new to me book, but it very much seems like something that's up my alley. Now, last but not least is a book that I've kind of been reading off and on, and that is The Contemplations by Victor Hugo. This is a book of poetry that he wrote, and for those who might not know, Victor Hugo is the author of Les Mis, Les Miserables, and despite having a lot of success as a novelist, was primarily a poet, and he lived basically the entire 19th century. He died in like 1885 and was born right around 1800. He was a poet, a novelist, a statesman, a senator, and an advocate for the poor and the working class. He was a very fascinating individual, and his work falls more into the Romantic period. So some of the poems can be a little bit worthy of a bit of an eye roll because they are very dramatic, but still quite beautiful. Now, if you're trying to learn French and you kind of want to get into some poetry, I would say that this is a pretty accessible book for you to pick up. Hugo does not use a lot of really advanced vocabulary, at least in the early parts of the poetry collection. I would say in general, his work is pretty accessible from a language learning perspective, but also his work is pretty good in English too. So if you're wanting to get introduced to French literature, but you don't speak French, pick this one up, see what you think. I think he has a lot of really wonderful things to say, and it's a really good collection of poetry. Alrighty, so here are the books that I am hoping to read in March. I've already got a start on a couple of them, so we will see how things go. I'm pretty excited to get into the books that I haven't read yet, but also jumping into the ones that I have. Let me know in the comments section what you are most excited for me to read, and tell me what books of these you have read or want to read. And I would love to know your thoughts about that whole question of writing from a perspective that's not your own. Because I know as a gay man, I get a little bit annoyed whenever I'm reading a book by a straight author whose main characters are queer, like Call Me By Your Name by Andre Aciman. That book just rage. So I don't have any conclusions to draw from that, but I do have a lot of thoughts and feelings about them. So we'll see how those sort of pan out as I begin this study in preparation for my classes. Well, thank you so much for watching, and I hope that the lighting and the background are kind of improving. Obviously, this is a super new channel. I'm still sort of playing with things and experimenting with backgrounds, lighting, all of those things. Someday I will get a really nice camera that I can see myself while I'm filming so that I can make adjustments as needed, but for the time being I'm filming on my phone. So again, I hope you enjoyed watching, and if you feel so inclined, give me a like, a comment, and of course subscribe if you want to see more. But that's it for today. Thanks so much for watching. Bye! Hello, Douglas. How are you? Do you want to say hello to YouTube? No, you don't. Not really. And this is the other one. This is Wally. Say hi, Wally. Yeah. This is a good kitten. Okay. Enjoy your nap.